and unfortunately, that can also be their weakness when it starts raining because they can't really hear their prey above the pattering of rain, and it just puts them off hunting, so they can't hunt in rain. And barn owls are one of the most widespread birds of prey, second after the peregrine falcon, and they aren't endangered in the UK, but they are closely monitored by the RSPB, and because they are also very elusive creatures and very rarely seen. But if you ever do get to see a barn owl, even if it's just for a short second, then you are among one of the luckiest people in Britain to see these birds. Of course, that is the range of the barn owl. They're found across much of Britain. And the next bird I'm going to show you is one of the most powerful birds we have in the UK, and also one of the most elusive. It is the goshawk. Goshawks are the largest the largest hawk in the British Isles. They are a very rare and elusive bird of prey that is only found in a few parts of Britain. But they are often seen in deep woodland that are undisturbed by humans. And of course, goshawks are famously elusive. They prefer to live in dense woodland far away from humans. And of course, the woodland they prefer to live in quite often is conifer woodlands with like lots of conifer trees. These that are like pine trees. But they can also hunt in open grassland where they can find prey and occasionally perform their mating ritual. Now the goshawk is almost as big as a buzzard in size, and of course they have probably the most distinctive part about them is their eyes. I mean, they're almost fierce, bright red eyes with a very fierce and angry look in them. And of course, to me, that is one of the most intimidating birds, but also one of the most fascinating. And and of course, they don't really have large wingspan. I mean, their wings are quite short and rounded with a fan-shaped tail which helps them dodge and weave in between trees where they ambush prey. And of course, goshawks feed on a wide range of prey. I mean, they feed mostly on birds like pigeon, duck, goose, pheasant, partridge, and grouse and crows. Of a few species, but they will also take mammals like rabbits, squirrels, and big females can even take brown hares, which is one of the reasons they've been used in falconry for so long. And goshawks were among the two most common birds of prey next to the peregrine that were used in falconry in the medieval era. And the goshawk was flown by the yeoman. The goshawk was known as the cook's bird because of the amount of prey it could catch, and of course that means that the yeoman was a very lucky man, so he could feed his family. Of course, goshawks are still flown in falconry today, but they're not used in displays because they're a one-man hunting bird and they can be quite stressed and agitated in big crowds. And of course, goshawks are ambush predators, and of course they usually use the sit and wait technique where they just perch on a branch and just wait to see if there's any prey around with eyesight that is 6 times better than ours. They will then launch themselves off the tree, dodge and weave between the trees, and then bang! get their prey before they even notices that it's been targeted. And goshawks were once widespread across much of Britain, but unfortunately a few decades ago they were persecuted by humans and wiped out from much of Britain. But falconers in the 1960s and 80s decided to bring them back, and they actually brought some birds over from mainland Europe and released them into a few parts of Britain. And while they are still very difficult to see, they are around in Britain and slowly spreading back to the rest of the UK. Here is their range. Of course, they're big populations in Scotland, Northern England, and of course in Wales. The next bird I'm going to show you is my favourite member of the crow family. It is the raven. Now, ravens are the largest of the crow family, and when I say the largest, I mean a raven's wingspan can be up to 1 metre long, and they have a very large beak, a large and strong beak. They also have, compared to their body size, very big brains, so they are very intelligent birds. Of course, ravens live on across much of Britain. They live at the uplands, moorlands, cliffs, mountains and country and coastlines of England, Wales, the Highlands of Scotland and Ireland. But the easiest way to see a raven is to go to the Tower of London, where tame birds are kept there to this day under the ancient legend that their presence protects London from invasion. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, ravens are not only the largest of the crow family, they're also the world's largest perching bird. Ravens feed on a wide variety of things, from small mammals to nesting birds and berries, but they will also scavenge on carrion like sheep carcasses, and will even flock together to raid seabird colonies for eggs and chicks. But their scavenging nature, because of their scavenging nature, like eagles and other raptors, they've been perceived as a threat to sheep and game birds. But their scavenging nature means they tend to go for the sick or injured first. But they are an important part of the ecosystem and for scavenging on carcasses of dead animals. Ravens mate for life and will quite often perform a very interesting courtship display to find a partner. Early in the year, a pair of ravens will take on a breathtaking aerobatic show where they almost chase one another, tumble and dive, and even roll right over onto their backs in mid-air with wings almost closed. During the courtship, the pair will also quite often sit side by side, gently preening each other's feathers. And during that ritual, they will make a almost warbling sound. This is often to solidify their bond for life. And ravens are a large predator, so they need a good deal of space to nest and hunt in order to survive. Once they've established their territory, they have to see off rivals of their own species, as well as other raptors like buzzards and peregrines, which seek out similar habitats and prey. As many of you know, ravens have been associated with myth and legend for centuries. In Norse mythology, the raven was the companion of Odin, the Norse god of war. In A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin, ravens were used to send messages throughout the Seven Kingdoms, but also there was the three-eyed raven. Then, but probably the most famous was Edgar Allan Poe's poem The Raven, and also in J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit, ravens were used by the dwarves of Erebor to contact their kin in the Iron Hills. So ravens have been famous across the world for their association with myth and legend. Ravens are also regarded as one of the most intelligent birds. In fact, they actually have been known to use tools to get food, but also can solve problems that human beings think are impossible. And that makes them one of the smartest animals on Earth. But they could be even smarter than human beings. Ravens nest on cliffs around the coast or on mountains, but also in quarries and in large trees in parkland or large forests. Females will lay about 4 to 6 bluish-green eggs in a nest of twigs and moss. Both parents will take turns brooding the eggs while one goes off to forage, but they will also look after and protect and feed the chicks until they're old enough to fend for themselves and find their own territories. While the raven is still absent from much of lowland Britain, slowly populations of this bird have been starting to build back up, and there are small pockets of them in many parts of southern Britain. But they have been in decline in a few parts of Britain, especially the Scottish borders and Northumberland. This is mainly down to more efficient sheep rearing practices, which are leaving fewer carcasses for the ravens to feed on, but also farmers and gamekeepers shooting them for sport or because of the superstition that ravens bring bad luck, which is absolutely rubbish. Of course, as I mentioned before, the easiest way to see a raven is to go to the Tower of London, but I personally would prefer to see these birds out in their natural habitat, and I have seen them out in the wild on occasion. Of course, that is their range. As you can see, they're still spreading to the rest of lowland Britain. And the next animal I'm going to show you is probably our most popular animal, the otter. Otters are the second largest British weasel after the badger. They are found across the waterways and coastlines of Britain, but they are, however, one of the hardest animals in Britain to find and film. Otters are very long and slender mammals. A big male can grow to be 1.55 metres long and weigh 18 kilograms. They have greyish-brown fur, a broad, stout and pale chest and throat, and they also have a broad and paddle-shaped tail, as well as sharp teeth and powerful jaws that can bite through shell, flesh and even bones. Otters are found in habitats across Britain. They're found in wetlands, rivers, coastlines of Britain, and they can live anywhere that has a healthy waterway, and there's space for them to make a den and to raise their pups and find food. But they are still very elusive creatures, and even for the most experienced wildlife watchers, are very hard to find. Otters are secretive and solitary and mostly nocturnal, which means they're mostly active at night. They are also territorial by nature. Individuals only tend to come together to mate, Mothers with pups are the most common social group